Okay guys, so welcome to the next part of the budget video, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the practical application. So we're going to go through the budget template that I've given you and we're going to fill it out together. So these are the resources that I have provided you with. The first thing is the shareholders document. We've spoken about that already. And now we come to the budget breakdown. There are two versions of this document. You have a paper version, which is the one that we're going to go through together. And I'm going to actually show you how to calculate the different things in there. And then you also have an Excel version. I will open it up and show it to you, but we're not going to go through it together. It's just an automated way for you to do your budget. I am obviously in favor of Excel. It's much easier to work with. It's easier. It automatically calculates everything for you, and you can also easily edit it. It's completely editable. So that's something that I would suggest is you use Excel, but to understand what we're doing, watch this video as I go through the paper version. So get your resources and let's get started. Okay, so here is the first page of the budget template that I've provided you with. I'm going to be looking at my screen as we go through this together. Let's start off on the top left. Here we have something called the total wedding budget, and this is made up of two parts. It's your couple savings. So remember we spoke about this. It's how much you're putting towards your wedding. It might be savings, it might be not, but it's your money that you're putting towards it. And the second aspect is other contributions. This should be the sum of everybody else's money that is going towards your wedding. So it could be parents, grandparents, friends, whatever, it doesn't matter. But whoever else is giving you money for your wedding, that is what's going to go into other contributions. And both of these together added up is going to give you your total wedding budget. Your total wedding budget is the total amount of money that you have to spend for and on your wedding. So now we're going to look at the budget breakdown, which is this portion down here. The essential idea with the budget breakdown is we're taking your total amount of money that you have to spend on your wedding and we're breaking it into categories of expenses, because essentially your budget is going to be spent on certain things. These things will have costs, whether they are physical items or services. Essentially, they are just going to turn into costs, and all of those costs cannot exceed your total budget. So what we're doing is I'm giving you just a few simple categories that you can use to plan your costs. Now, these categories are the market standard of the most common categories that you find in a wedding, and along with these categories I have also given you the industry standard. So if you look at the first column, it says category here, and then all of these, I think there are about 19 or 20 of them. These are the general categories you find in a wedding. So for example, your food, your venue, music, like just logical things, right? A bartender or a beverage service, photographer, videographer. These are all of your vendors, and your decor, your dress, your hair, your makeup. Common, very, very common categories. So that's listed here. And then what we have next to it is the industry guide percentage. So this is telling you, according to the industry, this is the suggestion of how much you should budget to spend on those categories. So for food, according to the industry, you should budget 20% of your total budget. So this percentage is related to the amount of the total money that you have. What portion of it should you be spending on food? And the suggestion is you should spend 20% of it. So 1/5 should be for food. The other common high rollers here are your venue, your music, your beverage and your bartending, and then you see it's distributed and it goes down. And one of the items here which is quite important is your miscellaneous. So your float is suggested to have a 5% distribution, so that you always have some kind of buffer when you're actually planning your budget. Now, all of these things will add up to 100% because technically you're distributing your budget, right? So it's all of this must actually come up to what your budget is, so 100%. Something I want to mention here is that just because these are industry categories, this doesn't mean that all of this is going to apply to your wedding. So you can chop and change, you can mix about, you can take something out, put something in. It really is just a general thing. So you are enabled and you can and you should take this and adapt it to your specific wedding and the needs that you have. You may not need a bartender, you may not need transportation, you may not need a marriage officiant. Perhaps this is just not applicable to your wedding. In that case, you're just going to go ahead and take away the thing that does not apply to you, and whatever percentage is left over, you can either move it to something else that you think is more important to you and that you want to move it towards, or you can pop it down into your buffer category and just increase that amount so that you have that kind of float and you have extra money. And in the end, maybe you can even take that and put it towards your honeymoon if you want. Now you'll notice that your honeymoon is not on this list because this is specifically for your wedding day. This is everything that's going to affect your wedding day. This is your budget. There is a separate sheet and budget that I have for your honeymoon, which we'll come to in the end. But if you wanted, you could decide that you want this to be your honeymoon, a part of your buffer, not the entire thing, because you still have to have a buffer. But you could say that, hey, if I do have a buffer, whatever is left over will just go towards our honeymoon, right? But that's only if there's something left over. It's important that you allocate something to a buffer just in case of an emergency. So now let's do an example so you can see exactly how it works and how we calculate everything. So let's start on the top left with our total wedding budget, right? If we're trying to calculate that, say for example, you and your fiance have 50,000 that you want to put towards your wedding. You would write 50,000 there. And then maybe your parents are giving you 50,000. So you're going to put 50,000 here. Then you're going to add these together, and that's going to give you the 100,000 that you see here. Okay? So your total wedding budget, the total amount that you have to spend on your wedding is 100,000. Then you're going to hop down to the budget breakdown. Step number one, you're going to figure out whether these categories are applicable to you. If they are applicable to you, you're going to leave them in. If they're not, you're going to delete them. So I'm assuming all of these are applicable to me, so I'm going to leave it in. Then I'm going to look at the first one, which is food, and the suggested is 20%. And I think I don't really want to have 20% of my food. I think I'm going to be spending 15% on my food because I think for me that's just more realistic. So what I would do is I would take away the 20, and then what I'm going to do is in my allocation, which is basically saying this is the percentage that I am allocating, okay? This is what I want. It can be equal to the industry standard or it can be different. Like in this case, I'm making it 15% instead. By making this 15%, I now have a difference of 5% that's left over. So, like we said before, I can either take the 5% and go down here and put it in my, or add it to the 5 that's already there in my miscellaneous or float column, or I can distribute it somewhere else that I want it to go to. And I have decided that I'm going to put it towards my venue instead. So now, my industry standard of 15 doesn't apply because I've added the 5 from the food into my venue. So my new percentage is 20% for my venue. Okay, so how would you then change this into a monetary value? So a monetary value is super easy. All you have to do is take the percentage. So you're going to take the 15% that you have there. You're going to then divide it by 100 and multiply it by your total budget. You're always going to take the percentage times your total budget, and that's just going to give you the monetary value. So for example, my food is going to equal 100,000 multiplied by 15 over 100, and that gives me 15,000. So this is 15,000. It could be rands, it could be dollars, it could be SEK, it could be Australian dollars, New Zealand dollars, pounds, euro, whatever. It's whatever currency you are in. You're just taking the percentage and you're converting it into a monetary value. We're going to come back to the 17,000 just now. On this page, what we're looking at here is the further breakdown. In the beginning, we took your total budget and we broke it down into the first iteration. So in that iteration, you have all your categories in expenditure, and then you have allocated percentages to it, and now you know for every single category how much you can spend on it. So food was 15,000, for example. And now what we're doing is we're going one step deeper. Because remember, if you're going to go to somebody who's going to be providing you the service of providing your food, making your food for you, they're not just going to give you a cost or an invoice that says food with just one number. It's probably going to be multiple things that make up that delivery. So it might be the meal itself per guest that they will then cost. It might be the dishes that they're going to be using to eat with, maybe, you know, the cutlery and things like that. If your decor person is not providing your table linens, then maybe the food person is also providing that. Maybe your food person is also doing your cake and they're the same person. I don't know, and you don't know that yet, right? So it's going to be made up of a number of different items, and all of these items together will add up to that expense. So this page, and you can use this for however many categories you have, you can print it out, and then there's also the Excel sheet, so you can just easily pop that into whichever cell you want. You can add in, you can delete, but basically you're going to go into each category and be able to go into a bit more detail, and this part is usually done a little bit later on when you start meeting your vendors and having those discussions and getting some feedback from them and getting some potential quotes from them. Then you would probably be able to do this in more detail. But just for now, I'm going to show you how it's done. So here's an example of food and how we're going to break that down a little bit further. So if you look here, I've basically just written food because that's my expense category. And then I have a couple of items. So the first thing is cocktail hour. So perhaps in the cocktail hour, or that's what some people call it, you might just call it like when the hors d'oeuvres, you know, time when people just come in and they're mingling, or mingle time, and they're just chilling and it's before the ceremony, but you want to give them like a little drink and a little snack. So maybe at this point, this could be a separate item that is costed separately because it's not exactly your sit-down meal. So that could be one thing. And then you have the actual sit-down dinner, and then maybe, like I mentioned, you might have linen or dishes or whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever is going to make it up. There could be multiple things down here. But the point is, we're going to have all of these, and again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to allocate a percentage. We're going to guess what percent we want to spend on these things. So obviously for our dinner, just logically, if you're going to have a wedding where you're having a sit-down dinner, this is probably going to be where you put the biggest chunk of that expenditure, right? So this is something personal. You need to decide exactly how much you're willing to contribute to that specific thing versus the cocktail hour or versus all the other things that may come up. Like I said, this is probably something that you're going to iron out when you discuss with your vendors, because they might give you options. It's also dependent on your venue. Like, all of these things are interconnected. Do not freak out. We're going to learn about all of this in the future videos when we go through every single vendor. But if you keep this in your mind now, because you don't need to go into this kind of detail right now. The first page that we did was the most important thing, because when you see your vendor, you have to have your budget per category with you before you go meet them. The detail, which is what we're doing now, is not something you need now. It's something you're only going to look at later once you've actually started meeting your vendors. But I'm showing you how to use this template, and this template is something you're going to use now at the very outset, and then also something that you're going to use when you meet your vendors, and something you are going to consistently be updating so you're on track with your budget. So let's assume it's a bit later on in your wedding. You've already got a quote from your food vendor, and they've told you that these are various options that they provide, and you've decided that you want to spend X amount, whatever percentage, on these different things, and then you're getting the actual cost from them. So you're actually getting how much each of these items are costing you because they provided you with a quote. So you would go and you would write down all of those in this column. Remember, I've already showed you how to do the My Allocation. So once you guess your percentage, you'll be able to calculate what your monetary value is that you should be spending on your cocktail hour, your monetary value for dinner, your monetary value for linen. And all of that is going to add up to your 15,000. And this 15,000 is coming from your initial calculation in your breakdown. The 15,000 is coming from here. Remember, we calculated that here. So that's where you're getting this 15,000 from to put into, and to make sure that it's balancing in the category that you're now going into depth with. So if you balance this 15,000, everything here must add up to this, because that is the maximum amount you have to spend on food. So everything that you're estimating must equal to 15. Now, when you meet your vendor and they give you the actual cost of what it's going to be, and you decide, you know what, it's fine, I have to go with you, I want to go with you, and this is what we're willing to accept, then that means you're going to go into the actual cost column and you're going to put down what it's actually going to cost you for all of these items. Once you have all of your actual costs, this will probably equal to your total quote value. And for example, I've said that in this example, I actually agreed to paying 17,000 instead of 15,000 for food. Now, immediately you can see that 17,000 is greater than 15, which means I'm over budget. I have spent 3,000 more than what I should be spending on food. And this essentially leaves me with two options. The first option is that I need to take out money from my buffer in order to pay for this, therefore my buffer is going to go down. Or I need to go to all the other expense categories that I have and take away 2,000, sorry, not 3. I need to take away 2,000 from any one of those, whichever one I deem to be the least important. I'm going to go to that one and take away the 2,000, or I'll just take away a little bit from every single one. So it kind of balances out. And therefore, I've made up that deviation and that difference by balancing out the rest of my expenses. The 17,000 is an actual amount that we need, because what we're doing now is tracking our budget. You've moved away from the estimation phase and you're now in the tracking phase. So your 17,000 is what you're now going to take and put up here, because now you have a final cost. You have something that is actually leaving your pocket, and that's really important because it's going to tell me where am I in my budget. It's going to give me an idea of if I'm over or under budget. And I don't want to be over budget. I want to either be just on budget or I want to be under. So once you've done this for all of your different categories of expenses, you will basically have all of these numbers filled in, right? Like all of them will have some kind of actual amount. And remember, when you're doing this, you're also playing that balancing game. If you don't play the balancing game, you're going to have a real problem, because you're going to be excessively over budget, or you might not have control over this. But to help you do that, you basically sum up this column, which is called my actuals, and then you're going to go up to this. This is your budget status and your budget tracker. This is going to tell you whether you're over or under budget. So basically, this is just adding up all of your actuals here. So whatever your number is here, you're going to go and write your total actuals here. So say that your actuals are 170 once you add everything up. Remember, we calculated our total budget to be 100,000. Sorry, this should have one more zero. So if we have 100 here, sorry, I'm writing with a mouse. So if we have 100,000 here and we have 170,000 here that we are physically spending, like this is actually what we are paying the quotes to our vendors, but I only had an allocated amount of 100. That means that I am over budget by 70,000, okay? So this is going to give me a negative 70,000. And this is telling me that I have a huge problem, that I am spending 70,000 that I don't actually have. So what are you going to do? And this is the entire point of doing a budget, is to make sure that as you're going through, you're consistently doing this. This is something that as we go through the videos, you will see I consistently say to you, go back and update your budget. Go back and update your actuals, because this is something that happens throughout your wedding process. Your budget is going to be something that is dynamic. It's not static. It's not something set in stone that never changes. It's something that is dynamic, changing all the time, that will require you to keep on it. It will require you to check it, to make changes, to be adaptable, and to maintain it so that you actually know what you're doing, you know where you stand, you can look at this easily, you can show it to anybody, whoever, like if your mom comes and says, hey, do you have this under control? How's it going with your wedding planning? How's it going with your budget? You can easily just open up the sheet and say, oh, you know, after evaluating like vendor number 3 that we've now seen, this is where we're standing with our budget. We're under budget or we are over budget, and therefore we need to think about this and make adjustments as we go. So that's really what the budget is intended to do. It's intended to be a tool for you to keep yourself on track, to know where you are financially. And lastly, here is the honeymoon budget. As you see, identical to the first page. On the top left, you have your total honeymoon budget there. You have your budget breakdown down here, and then you also have your budget status tracker. So again, this is used in exactly the same way. You can use it separately. If you want, you can be the kind of person who says, no, I don't want a separate honeymoon budget. I'm going to just add my honeymoon as an expense to my total wedding budget. A lot of people do that, but you just need to make sure that you adjust those percentages accordingly so you're actually allocating money to your budget, because if you remember, the categories and percentages I gave you add up to 100. So you need to figure out where that percentage is going to come from and how much you're going to put towards it. Okay, so now I want you to just quickly open up the 2 resources I provided you, where I said one was the budget template in paper and one was in Excel. I want to go through it quickly with you and just show you what I've actually given you. So on the paper document, as you can see, it is identical to what I went through with you. You have the industry percentages, which are right here, and then it's completely blank. I've given you a page on the next page, which is completely blank. So you will be able to use this, print out as many as you need, and then be able to fill this in completely on your own. You don't even have to use the same titles. You can put whatever you want in here, and also you can completely adjust and customize the expenditure categories as you want them. It's the same thing with the in-depth, going deeper into each expense. I've also given you a page for that. Again, you can print out however many you need. And then here is your honeymoon and budget template, which is also completely blank for you to use. So now let's go to the Excel sheet. Okay, so here's the Excel sheet that I've provided you with. It is completely customizable. You can click anywhere, you can do whatever you want. It's really up to you. You can change the names. That's why I like having a document that's digital, because it's much easier for you to change and adapt to what you want. I've put in the formulas to kind of help you and to guide you. It will already sum up things for you, but if you're good with Excel, or you could also open this up in Google Sheets, by the way, but if you're good with this, then you definitely know how to use it. So yeah, basically, again, very simple. You would just type in whatever number you want to use here. So we could try the 50,000 again, and then the 50,000 contribution, that gives me 100. And as you see in the Excel sheet, it will automatically put it where it needs to go. So you don't have to actually physically sit and calculate things, because the sheet does it for you. So here we could try and say, you know, we had 15% before as an example, and as you see, it automatically calculates that should be 15,000. There's no currency here. Again, it depends on whatever currency you're using. And then everything should add up. So here, as you see, the percentage is 15. This should both match and be 100% in the end. If you slide down, you're gonna see all the in-depth food, all the in-depth expense categories that we set up before. So here is food. I've put in a couple of things in every single one of these to help you along, and you can definitely delete them. You can add whatever you want in here. And yet again, if you put in a percentage here, so let's go with 5, as soon as you put that in, you're going to have an automatic calculation happening for you. If you have not put in anything in this table, for example, if you want to do something with venue, but you haven't actually put in a percentage here, then that's not going to calculate, because it needs to have something here to work with. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And other than that, this Excel sheet is super easy to use. As you can see, once you've done everything, it's going to update the status for you as well. The one thing I want to just show you is that your actual amount in the beginning, when you start off, I've set the actuals to just be equal to the budgeted amount in your currency. And if you do not want that, you just have to go in here and change it. So instead of us spending the 750, say we spend 600, then that's fine. You would go in there, put in your 600. It shows you that you have a saving of 150 because the number is positive. So that means you've made a saving. And then up here, it's going to show you that you physically spent 600, and then it's going to tell you that you have that 150 deviation. If it's positive, it's good. If it's negative, it's not so good. So that's it for the budgeting video. I hope this was helpful and that you learned a lot. Now I know it's a lot of information, but all you have to do is take it one step at a time. Remember that we covered both the initial estimation as well as your general follow-ups, your general day-to-day usage of your budget as you're going along. So we've done things that might seem overwhelming because you haven't gotten there yet, but don't freak out. It's going to be okay. You will definitely be able to handle this. Just watch this video a few times if you need to. Play around with the sheet. I really recommend using the digital version. It's so much easier. Play around with the sheet. You know, try to figure out where the numbers are. If you have any questions or comments, you can pop me an email or leave a comment, and then I will definitely try to answer them. If something is unclear to you, then just let me know. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.